Hey, welcome back to How to Be Patient. I'm your host, Preston Roche, and I'm here with your co-host, Margaret Duncan. And we have another guest here today who is...
my best friend from residency and also a couples and sex therapist and psychiatrist in reproductive and women's mental health, Dr. Nikki Haddad.
Dr. Nikki Haddad.
Welcome, Nikki.
So happy to be here.
If you were, what would your walkout song be as a sex therapist?
Ooh, let's get it on.
A classic.
That's good.
Classic.
It's Marvin Gaye. Cool. So, you guys were in residency together, right?
Yes,
Okay,
indeed.
cool. And so, Nikki, is Nikki okay, or is it Dr. Haddad?
Oh yeah,
Which
of
you
course.
prefer?
Please call me Nikki.
Okay, nice. We're familiar here. So, I actually don't really know much about this type of fellowship. How did you find that coming out of residency?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, it's unaccredited, so there's not that many fellowships in women's mental health around the country. I think there's probably 12 total, and 11 of the 12 are very focused in perinatal women's mental health, so reproductive health, around preconception counseling, pregnancy, and then the postpartum period. The fellowship that I'm in is the only one that exists right now that's actually not perinatal focused. So it's more focused on trauma disorders, eating disorders, personality disorders, and other things that affect primarily women, and the specific kind of physiology around that.
Gotcha. So you're a
that's my fellowship.
trailblazer, really. And unaccredited, I think we should say pre-accredited, right?
Yes.
All fellowships are in the pre-accreditation period.
I also want to
Okay.
state
like
that
that.
Nikki did 2 years of one. Our residency has one of the fellowships, and so Nikki is not saying she also did 2 years of specialized perinatal work outside of her
wow.
fellowship that she had during
Wow.
residency.
Humble too.
That's very humble. Yes. Yeah, that was part of why I didn't want to do perinatal, actually, is because not that I know everything there is to know by any means, but I just wanted to expand my kind of education around things that we didn't learn as much about. So, Margaret is doing a lot of the perinatal stuff now, and it's so important too, of course. But my kind of spiel is that women matter beyond just their reproductive capacities, and so I kind of like the concept of
women are more than baby ovens is your thesis. Wow. Well, that's definitely gonna stir the pot a little bit. And I hope that you can convince some other people to agree with you. For those who are listening, I'm being facetious. Like I really,
He didn't know he had pelvic floor in the last episode, and so now he's like,
yeah. Now that we've dispelled myths about the perinatal and women's fellowship, let's talk about our icebreaker question. Nikki, you have the distinct honor of joining us for the icebreaker today, which is, what is one myth about romantic relationships that you wish you had learned earlier or that more people talked about?
That's a fun question. I think for me, it's probably that when you meet the right, quote unquote, right person, that a relationship should be easy. I think parts of a relationship are easy, but relationships require you to kind of wake up every single day and choose to be there for that person, choose to show up, choose to love them. And they require time and energy and commitment and all of those things. And there's inevitably going to be challenges that come up as well. So I think the idea that if you're with the right person, things should be easy is kind of a dangerous myth that doesn't allow people to grow in relationship with each other. And one I definitely believed, because I watched a lot of Disney princess movies. I was like obsessed with those when I was little. And, the princess finds her prince and then lives happily ever after. And life is good, yada, yada. And the movie actually ends, right, when they meet. Because the
there is no happily
is
ever after. It's just your imagination.
Exactly. Happily ever after doesn't really exist, guys.
And that's the episode.
Credits.
We'll see. Leave us reviews.
All right. Thank you so much for listening tonight.
Okay, bye.
So that I really resonate with what you said. It reminds me of this passage I was listening to in the New York Times where they're talking about how to use metaphors for your relationship. And I think it was an advice piece for 2024. And they said that people think that good relationships are like a vase. It's pristine, it's beautiful. You put it in the middle of the living room so that all can see, but the second it gets knocked over, it shatters and it can't
Mm.
withstand any kind of conflict. And so they were saying, try to make your relationship more like a basketball, something that you can bounce around and is durable, you can play with. And if it falls on the ground or is thrown against the wall, it's going to come right back. And I really connected with you saying, if the right person makes everything easy, then that's it. But with the right person, you should be able to withstand the hard things, the whole basketball match, I guess.
I love that. And if the basketball deflates, you can re-inflate it too.
Yeah.
It's like more malleable. I think that's so. I would love to read that piece.
Yeah, I'll see if I can find it
Okay.
afterwards. Okay. Well, thank you for that wonderful and thoughtful answer. Hopefully Margaret can top it. I mean, not that it's a competition,
Let's
but
go.
let's
Nikki and I talk about this stuff ad nauseum, so I can't top it, is what I'm telling you. I think somewhat similar. I think this idea that we're just automatically built with relational skills and they're either you have them or you don't is kind of implicit. Like it's not something that a lot of people talk about until something's wrong, whether in the relationship. I also think a lot of intrapersonal skills are required for good interpersonal relationships. And so people come to therapy or they come to couples therapy when when something's going pretty feels bad or is going wrong in some way. And I think the cultural myth that it's like everyone just knows how to relate to people and that we don't need to talk about it or learn new skills keeps people, similarly to what you were saying, Nikki, like stuck. And it makes
Mhm.
them think that they're like particularly uniquely messed up rather than like, oh yeah, you guys don't know how to do this together yet. Like you're learning a new dance. So similar, I think, in that it gets them stuck and like they can't change.
Mhm. Like the myth that social romantic relationships are as instinctual as breathing
Hmm.
and can't
Mm-hmm.
be taught to the layperson. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I
Where
love
it
that.
really
And
is
that,
like it is a procedure.
yeah, yeah. And you have to learn in the relationship, but also as an individual. And we'll be talking about that, I think, in the podcast too, about the different components that you bring into a relationship and the stuckness that one can feel when it feels like things have to just be perfect. When in reality, there's a lot that you can do to change yourself and thus change the relationship, even if you don't have control over another person.
Mhm. Absolutely. Well, all great points, Margaret. A
How
close
about
second.
you?
So, I'm going to take a different approach and say that one myth that I believed for a long time that kind of drove me into relationships was that it's not okay to be alone. And I think
Hmm.
that the everything we're fed from early on is like you'll find someone, you'll find your prince charming or your princess and like everything's okay. Don't worry, there's other fish in the sea. Someone's going to come along. But what's never said by that and what's kind of implied by that is you won't be alone your whole life. Almost like it's a bad thing to be
Hmm.
alone. And so I think that there were a lot of times where I was in relationships and they weren't right for me or I wasn't happy and I was afraid to get out of them because I was like, oh, well, this is better than being alone. At least I'm not by myself. And I think once I realized that I had to have a stable relationship with myself and really realize, oh, I could be happy in solitude for a while, then that's actually the time where you become ready to accept someone else into your life. So you have
Yes.
you have to accept the thing that you're afraid of to make yourself, a stable ship ready to sail the seas instead instead of just trying to be a tugboat, I guess.
Right, right. Yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking about the difference between being alone and being lonely and how you can experience loneliness in relationship with another person. And in some ways that's almost more painful than being alone, but societally it's not as acceptable in a lot of spaces.
Absolutely, people will pity you when you're by yourself, and it's almost like I don't know. Don't pity the person who's enjoying their solitude. Pity the person who's unheard in an unhappy relationship. Because
Right.
that person is far lonelier.
Yeah. It makes
Yeah.
me think what you were saying, Preston, of this quote by um, the poet Rainier Maria Rilke, who said, like, I'm going to butcher the quote, but basically that, like, real love is guarding the other person's solitude
Mm.
um, rather than the urge to kind of control or compress it. which I think is, I don't think it has to have, like, I think there's a lot of debates online that are like, do you have to love yourself before you can love someone else? It's like, it's not so simple and straightforward as all that. But I do think there is something about, can you maintain the ability to not sprint away from yourself and your like inherent isolation in the world just because you're a human being, and
Hmm.
not sprint into a relationship because of it.
Yes, yes. I think that's such a gorgeous quote. And the idea of guarding someone's solitude is an act of love in a lot of ways, like allowing someone to stay who they are while loving them and being in a relationship with them is kind of the key.
Okay, well, we are going to take a quick break, and afterwards, we are going to talk more about the model that Nikki operates in as a couples therapist. And later on in the episode, Preston and I have picked a fictional couple we are going to cosplay as, and that Nikki is going to take us through a problem, and then we'll unpack what that was like. Okay, Nikki, I thought that us starting with one of the questions is, you're a psychiatrist. I think there's a lot of residencies that maybe people can see a couple or they can do family work, especially in child. But there's not as much of a focus on it anymore. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your certification and what drove you to go and get a separate certification that took a lot of time, effort, financial support kind of to become certified and do the work you're doing.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Um, I think that I've always known that sexual health and intimate relationships are important parts of overall wellness. I think we all know that as human beings and as psychiatrists, right? It's part of what makes humans humans. So I think right off the bat, my instinct was that as psychiatrists, we kind of have a duty, especially as people focused on the biopsychosocial aspects of care, to care about these things and ask our patients about these things even if it's not as emphasized in training. And so my specific kind of journey in that direction started when I was a PGY3, and my psychodynamic supervisor, she happened to be a trained certified sex therapist. And so she gave me a lot of wonderful advice and a lot of supervision just generally related to all psychodynamic things, but included a lens in the sexual health world. And relational health world. And so she really kind of opened my eyes to the importance of this work. And I think ever since implementing some of her strategies into my individual cases, whether it's psychopharm or psychodynamic, I just recognized how much it opens doors for me and my patients' relationships. And I think it's just made me a better psychiatrist. And so I think over time, I've just been more and more drawn to that world. And I think that it makes us understand the whole person and creates better trust.
Yeah. I mean, I think that a lot of us, like you're saying, kind of intuitively feel that, whether with our therapy or our medication patients, obviously how central relationships are. Um, did you feel like knowing, I know you didn't always know you were going to go into women's mental health, but like,
Mhm.
did you feel like as you started leaning towards that, it became, because obviously perinatal, we just had a pelvic floor therapist on of talking about kind of like sexual health, pelvic health, trauma, mental health.
Yeah.
Um, did you feel like there's a connection there for you that as you move towards fellowship, it was like, okay, this connection is really present? Because that's definitely something I've seen in my perinatal clinic where it's like, okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I think in the perinatal space, I was seeing a lot of women who were pregnant or postpartum come in with sexual concerns, or patients who wanted to get pregnant who had a variety of reasons that they couldn't. For example, like severe endometriosis or pelvic trauma, or even imperforate hymen, inability to have penetrative sex. There were so many different primary complaints that I would see in the perinatal space that I didn't feel like I had a wonderful grasp at treating and talking to them about. And so that was definitely a big part of my wanting to get trained in this space, to be able to just offer them resources and also just lessen the stigma around a lot of what I was seeing.
I think it's really interesting how you framed it as a door to just like find deeper levels of connection, understanding with your patients, because that's something that I see too. where people will come to me with primarily a sexual complaint, and it's almost never self-contained or has only
Mm,
something to do with the sexual issue. It's usually a way that some other disturbance in the relationship has manifested itself. And we're almost like trying to address that like incongruence between in the couple directly on may confront a lot of resistance using the sexual door as a way to kind of open up like why do we have these like mismatched expectations of each other,
yeah.
why do you feel this need to perform all the time, why do you have so much anxiety about like confronting a sexual experience, ends up like within seconds if you know how to talk about it well, which I don't. So I'm actually like, dang, I wish I was like better at talking about sex because like I want to address all these like
Mm,
insecurities and concepts of self, but then I kind of get stuck where it's like, okay, like I can see from far away that, something like premature ejaculation and anxiety and some like narcissistic organization may all be like very intimately connected in someone's like um, concept of themselves, but it's hard for me to like get there just on the sexual path, I guess, if that makes sense.
yeah. Well, actually, it's interesting you bring that up because I think that when people hear the phrase sex therapy, they think of one thing, which is that we're pretty much only going to be talking about sex, which is just so not true. And what you were saying, Preston, about how normally an issue in sexuality or sex is kind of telling a story of other things too is just right on the nose. It's so true. And I think that when someone comes in with a sexual issue, usually we'll spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes talking about that. And then we delve into their trauma history and their childhood and their relationship with their mom and the kind of classic things that you talk about in therapy because everything is linked. I mean, sex is linked to everything else. Um, and so you're probably doing a better job of it than you think you are
Oh,
by
thank you.
opening up those other doors. Yeah.
Look at me doing a good job, Margaret. Margaret thinks I do a bad job. We did a mindfulness episode the other day, and she like stopped me midway to tell me I was doing it wrong.
Oh, Margaret, I love you.
Was he doing it wrong? Yes. um,
I can't wait to unpack that in the couples work later with you
we
two.
can. Yeah, we can. I guess one thing I have a question for you. So obviously you're specialized in multiple ways. What do you think of like the general psychiatrist's understanding of this? I kind of think we're phobic. I think there's a lot of things we're phobic of as psychiatrists that we don't get rooted out in classic modern training. And so I'm just wondering, where do you think a general psychiatrist should be at with their level of talking to patients about this outside of SSRIs can
Yeah, not only
hurt?
phobic, I think we're a bit prude about
Yeah,
it.
I didn't want to use that
Yeah.
word, but yeah,
It's how I feel. Like
I know.
here's an SSRI also could cause some sexual dysfunction. Anyways, moving on, and
Yeah.
then whoa,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, yeah. Well, can you say more about the prude slash phobic component? Because I totally agree.
Yeah. So at least when I'm working with like preceptors or attendings, or especially as a student, and I was kind of watching people talk about their sex lives with or patients about their sex lives, usually they would say, "Are you sexually active? Yes or no?" It's like a binary question, and then
Hmm.
that was to inform whether or not they were going to counsel them on the sexual dysfunction that might come with like taking Lexapro, you know.
Yes.
And so a lot of times it was like, "I'm not sexually active." Okay, well if you ever do, Lexapro can cause some sexual dysfunction, which is like, first of all, the most vague, unhelpful term ever. Sexual dysfunction. Like,
Like, hey, something at your
what in
core
the
of who you
world?
are may be
Yeah,
messed
yeah,
up.
yeah,
Bye.
yeah. So, and then they're like, usually it's like, what kind of sexual dysfunction? Oh, like, anorgasmia, which is like, it's hard to climax, or sometimes your libido goes down. And for some patients, like, they're like, I'm not having sex. I don't care all about that. But for other patients, like,
Hmm.
all of a sudden that becomes the stuck point, and then they go back and forth about sexual dysfunction for the rest of the visit. And they're like, I'm not interested in the meds. I don't want to start them. And then I'm like, dang,
Mm.
like, I feel like a lot of it is like how you kind of present it to them, and
Yeah.
how you weave someone's like relationship with sex into their medication, their mental health. And so I don't have any like formal sex training, but one thing I've started doing is saying like, okay, so like this has the ability to affect, sexual performance. And for a lot of guys, we find it like delays orgasm. So for people that have premature ejaculation, actually is a way to treat it.
Mhm.
because it just kind of pushes the needle back. For some people, it goes too far back the other way and then becomes kind of hard to ejaculate.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, so just like any other knob that we're adjusting for your mood, this adjusts one of the knobs for sex. So I just want you to be aware of that. And I think that sometimes like me kind of almost presenting it, maybe I'm being prude too because I'm not talking about it as this like intimate thing, but I'm saying like, oh, your sexual function is another knob that we're adjusting, just like any other bodily function that you
Yeah.
have.
Mm.
Is
No, I don't think
if
you're
I'm like
being
decriminalize it a little
prude.
bit. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, no.
Thank you.
I think that being able to say more than the phrase "it could impact sexual dysfunction" is a great place to start. Truly, giving concrete examples about what SSRIs can do, and then if something comes up, here's what we can do about it. But I think like a concrete thing that I think all mental health practitioners could and should know how to do is initiate these types of conversations. So a practice that I started as a third year, honestly, through my supervision, she taught me how to have these conversations is first asking for permission with the patient. Is it okay if we talk a little bit about sex? If a patient has a strong trauma history or has any other reason that they wouldn't want to, they can say no, okay, end of conversation, or you can just quickly educate and say, okay, that's fine. No, you should know these things. But if they say yes, then you can kind of ask more generally what their sex life looks like and have an understanding of their relationship to sexuality. Who are they attracted to? What kind of sex do they have? Et cetera, et cetera. And then if and when you start a new medication, you can go into detail about what to actually look out for, right? And you named a lot of the things actually that I would be asking a patient
Mm,
in terms of anorgasmia, low desire, changes in lubrication, changes in the relationship. I mean, there's so many different aspects of sexuality that we know are correlated with psychiatric medications. So I think, very basically, that's the kind of thing that I would hope would be important to most mental health practitioners. That being said, I'm very aware that most mental health practitioners don't see couples.
Mm.
But I think it's still important for people to at least have a basic understanding of how to ask about relational dynamics. Because as we talked about, individuals, we're constantly in relation with each other. That's what makes us people. And so knowing how to have those conversations, I would argue, is also important.
mhm. It almost feels like you're doing a review of systems. Is what came through
Hmm.
to me. Imagine if when like you're doing a review of systems on someone's organs, and you're like, oh, and any chest pain when you work out, shortness of breathing when you exert yourself, and then we get to the GI and we're like, does poop come out of your butt? And they're like, yeah. And you're like, okay, moving on to MSK. And it's like, no, we get into like the nitty gritty specifics of everything, and then we just kind of say
Mm,
sex, yes or no. But I
right.
think it's really interesting how like another organ system, you're breaking it down to someone's relationship with sex, how like the acts they um, participate in, who they're attracted to, like all those things are important to kind of flesh that out. So then you can
Right.
see where do our medications fit into that paradigm.
There's so much that immediately is brought up in people and in us as providers, in terms of the performance of sexuality and desirability politics and like the power dynamic that is in the room, even when you're just seeing an individual patient. That I think your point, Nikki, of being like, can we talk about this? And the answer can be yes or no, or not today, but maybe some other time, is so important. And to like do everything we can to like many people have anywhere from discomfort to actual trauma around sexuality, how they practice it. Even we don't get into things like assault or rape. And I think that making consent and autonomy so central is so important. And I'm glad you brought that up because I don't know that we're taught how to talk about it in that way. I think people want to make
Hmm.
people feel comfortable, but how you actually do that is trickier.
Yeah, really well said. And I think that even if a patient's not interested in talking about sex right off the bat, it still means something to them that you're saying, listen, just so you know, this is a safe space to do so if and when you're ready. So even you just starting that conversation yourself is going to, again, open the door for future conversations for that person down the road when they feel more comfortable with you. And I also quickly want to name knowing who you are in relation to the patient is important because, for example, I'm a woman. Me asking my patients about sex may come off very differently than a cis man asking their patients about sex and kind of encompass a different level of comfort. So just naming that.
Especially if they're like a really attractive cis man.
Totally.
Can we cut that out,
I
editor?
run into that problem all.
Can we? He's 5'9", ladies. He's 5'9".
So,
Okay,
you
go.
did all of this work with kind of perinatal psychiatry, then started to focus on women and their trauma. But I'm curious, how did that other person get into the room? How did you start working with couples?
Couples? Yeah, well, I've always loved, as I know many people do, Esther Perel. I've listened to her podcast for a very long time. She does couples therapy sessions. And recently, me and Margaret and many other residents started watching the show Couples Therapy on Showtime. And I love it so much. I love the work. I think it's fascinating.
Orna.
And so that's Orna.
We are your fans.
We
met her.
We met Orna. She's fabulous.
We went to her talk.
Yeah, and she's just as amazing in person as on the show. And so I think as kind of fangirl, it's always been there in me. But from more of a professional and clinical lens, I think there are certain things that can only be touched in the couple space. And you really kind of can't work on in individual therapy. An example of that would be if I have a patient who's a cis man who comes in and is having issues with erections, for example. He may come in thinking that this is his issue and his issue only, right? And want to get counseling on that. And maybe we talk about meds, maybe we talk about his own kind of therapeutic process going on. But the reality is that there's two people in that sexual relationship. And at some point, we are going to have to bring his partner into the room to talk about how she's impacting him and he's impacting her. And it's just inevitable. So there's really kind of only so much you can do with individuals for certain types of presentations. So I think that's quite appealing to me, is knowing that I can just make this extra difference and go one step further with that second person in the room.
It's like trying to teach someone how to do salsa or something, and then you're like, I'm gonna show you your steps and then you go try it out.
Exactly. Yes.
It's like that might work sort of, but you aren't gonna get very far.
No. You'd just be fumbling on the dance floor.
Yeah. You'd be like, no one touch me. I can do this perfectly by myself. Can you talk a little bit more about the specific training you did? And because I know one of the things that I learned in talking to you is in the couples and sex therapy field, often the kind of highest standard of care is to be certified in both, which I think makes sense. But could you talk a little bit more about your specific training type?
Sure. And just to note, I'm not yet certified as a sex therapist. I get trained through the South Shore Sexual Health Center, which anyone can actually look up their courses online. And so I've taken, I think, 90 plus hours of individual courses, and then 60 hours of skills trainings. And then there's something called a sexual attitudes reassessment, the SAR, which is a 2-day, 14-hour training that kind of is more like a group therapy session that encourages you to look inwards at your own relationship to sex and sexuality, and then take it outward and reflect on those processes. And then, of course, you have to have a clinical caseload of 300 hours minimum. So that's all that goes into the process of becoming a sex therapist. And then separately, there's something called the Couples Institute, which many people use to better understand couples therapy and dive into the developmental model, which is what I use in my couples work. So doing those two things together is really fun because they're just so related. Sex therapy and couples therapy, you kind of can't have one without the other in a lot of ways. So that's my background there.
Is there like a board exam that you take at the end?
I wish, but there's not.
What, girl?
It'd be fun.
You see why we're friends. You see why we're friends, Preston.
I'm just like picturing like going into the testing center and everyone else is like taking the MCAT or the SAT. And it's just the Kama Sutra.
Later losers.
Like pictures
what in
of
the world is
genitals.
on that media tab?
See, that would be amazing.
I don't know about you, Margaret, or you, Nikki, but on my step 2, it was always the most like grotesque photos came up on my exam whenever the proctor was walking by.
It was worse when you'd be like studying in a coffee shop before step 2, and then it was like, why is this tissue dead on this?
Like, that's a lot of labia. Whoa. for 7 in the morning.
I feel like for all the dermatology pages, they were all just so graphic. You have to be very careful around family.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be like you're like at a nice little coffee shop and there's like pleasant music playing, and then all of a sudden. Anyway, okay, I think to get into a little bit more of the couples work, 'cause I know we have some questions we want to do at the end that people submitted on Instagram.
Yeah.
But so a little bit about the developmental model that you are trained in. I didn't, and Nikki and I have talked about this. Like, I've read books on couples work and things like that, but like, I think this is such an interesting lens that at least I hadn't been given before you taught us. Because I voluntold her that she would in the residency. But do you want to talk a little bit about the developmental model? Preston, have you heard of this?
No.
Okay.
This is all new to me.
Yeah, I'd imagine most people have not heard of it unless they have some exposure to couples therapy, which, again, most psychiatry residents don't. I mean, I certainly didn't before diving into it. But basically, the developmental model is considered in a lot of ways the gold standard of couples therapy for a lot of couples therapists that you ask. Everyone has a different kind of model that they use, but it's what I was trained in. And this was developed by Dr. Ellen Bader and Dr. Peter Pearson at the Couples Institute in San Francisco. And Ellen Bader still teaches through the Couples Institute online. And it is really centered on looking at different developmental stages that couples go through in the course of their relationship, and less about pathology, more on understanding where development might have been halted in the course of a relationship. And so it all sounds a little confusing, I think, when you first hear about it. But when you break it into stages, it makes a lot more sense. I promise.
So what are those stages?
Yeah, so there's 5 stages. The first stage is called symbiosis. And you may actually know that term from Margaret Mahler. Remember her? No?
Were you talking to me?
I don't know who I was talking to. I don't want to
yes. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe Preston was looking for Margaret
No,
Mahler
not
in the
familiar.
room.
We have to remember we're in a really psychodynamic program.
I had to relearn her studying for the boards recently, so I probably wouldn't have recognized that name before. But she created the process of childhood development theory. And so she talked about how children go through this normal stage of development from birth to 5 years. And that is, I believe it's normal autism, symbiosis, differentiation, practicing, rapprochement, and then object constancy. And so the idea in very simple terms is that a baby will start being kind of one with mom. And so in this symbiotic state, almost like they're still in the womb, right? They're like attached to mom's chest.
Like
a lot
Tom
of the
Hardy in
time.
Venom.
Exactly.
I don't even know that reference.
He's
That
a
was the program,
symbiote.
eh?
Yeah.
What?
Okay, I'm tracking. So when we first meld, we form this symbiotic relationship where we're almost like mother and child, mother and fetus, not to get too Oedipal about it. Okay. What is that? What is that stage like as a couple?
Great question. It's basically the honeymoon stage in colloquial terms.
Okay.
So I'm sure we've all heard of the honeymoon stage. We've all probably experienced the honeymoon phase. It's basically when you think your partner is absolutely perfect. You put them on a pedestal. Everything they do is adorable. They have no flaws. You're attached at the hip and you're just happily head over heels in love.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Ellen Bader calls this temporary psychosis.
Hell yeah. And I think Taylor Swift would agree.
Yeah.
I think
So
she would agree.
is there a difference between limerence and the honeymoon stage? Is this another synonym for it?
How do you define limerence?
I guess I see limerence as almost like a fervent obsession with the other person. And so I think it might be able to like exist within the honeymoon stage, but it feels like almost like something different. Like I love you and I want to be with you. And also like if things were not to work out, like my world would, implode. Things,
Yeah.
stars would collide
I think
and there'd be
limerence
the
is also
apocalypse.
like definitionally kind of like, I think you're right that it can exist in this stage, but I also think limerence is more populated by fantasy than this is like everything's good and I'm seeing and feeling all the good things. Limerence is often defined as like this obsessional kind of like existing in
What
this
if?
the single person. Yeah, like fixation
Mhm.
on the other.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I think this could exist in that, or like someone could be more like.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I like when you said limerence feels like, I'm actually not super informed about limerence, but the idea that limerence is mostly fantasy did remind me a little bit of symbiosis, because it is in a way fantasy. You're kind of fantasizing about who you want your partner to be and who your partner actually is. When in reality, your partner is not a perfect person. There's no such thing as a perfect person.
But you're taking all their actions and you're almost like back end placing them into this fantasy you're building in real
Right.
time.
Yeah.
Okay, so symbiosis, the honeymoon stage, everything's perfect.
hmm
They're the idyllic human. Then what stage comes next?
Well, very quickly, just on symbiosis, because I think that when we talk about it, it sounds really amazing, right? It sounds like, well, why would everybody not want to just sit in this stage forever? It
Mm,
sounds so lovely, and it is really lovely. And I think it's important, actually, that relationships start in this first stage. And we know that if there's not a basis of symbiosis, that it's actually a lot harder to treat a couple that comes to you, because symbiosis is a foundation for that relationship and a place for them to come back to when the going gets
Mm.
tough. But it's also a crutch. So staying in symbiosis, it's reminding me a bit actually about what you were talking about earlier, Preston, about the fear of being alone, is usually because it's this attempt to maintain attachment, and going beyond symbiosis really forces you to look into the existential anxiety
Look into the
of being
void.
alone.
The next step in the
It
relationship.
does. That is it. And it's very scary. And it's scary to know how to maintain your self esteem without the help from your partner in managing your emotional triggers. And so that's why the honeymoon period is so strong and so powerful, and people just want to live in it forever. But it's just not feasible and it's not healthy.
Do you think there's an element to it of like the fantasy that like people enter a relationship and suddenly it's like so great and they're experiencing all these feelings of being known and all their hopes and dreams, like all these old stories also being played enacted in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that does that lead to people wanting to stay in that stage more? I mean, this is like you can't say this probably as a generalization, but like if they come from a place where they're like, everyone is awful, I don't have close friends, I don't whatever, or they have strong stories that have been like, this is going to be the pinnacle of my life. Do you think
Yeah.
anecdotally that gets people more likely to be stuck there? Like, does the narrative impact it?
Yes. Well, I think a lot of things can impact it. Interestingly, one of the most common, and we'll get to this, but common dyads that we see in couples is symbiotic. So a lot of people actually get stuck in symbiosis. But what's interesting is that it doesn't normally look very pretty. Like it's not looking very lovey-dovey. It tends to look more hostile and passive aggressive. Or more very kind of conflict avoidant. So the longer you stay in symbiosis, the less it looks the way it starts out looking. It kind of takes a different shape, if that makes sense.
mhm. When you say symbiotic, do you mean that like one one member of the party's in symbiosis and so is the other one.
Yes,
So
exactly.
do you like label the patients, say like, okay, I've identified one patient's in symbiosis, the other one is maybe on a different rung of this ladder.
Yes. Yes,
Oh,
exactly.
interesting.
I don't
Okay.
tell the patient that, but that's how
Sure.
that's how I think about
Family
it.
feud thing behind you. You're just like, and you are not very
You're
developed.
still on level 1. Okay. So, okay, I'm now excited to hear what level 2 is. I
Yes,
shouldn't call them
yes. So
levels, but
level
the next stage of
2
development.
so the next stage of development is my favorite stage to talk about, actually, which is differentiation. And I like it because you just hear this word all the time when you're in supervision and doing your couples work. It's just so critical for couples. And really what it is learning how to manage your anxiety over differences that arise in the individual and thus the couple. So when couples have been together for a while and boundaries start to merge, the process of differentiation starts. And it's when you kind of learn how to sit with your partner and their differences without the anxiety of that conflict becoming overwhelming. And so I think sometimes it's helpful to actually use concrete examples for this. So one of the examples that I give is really small, and that's intentional because differentiation tends to start out in very small ways. And that would be you and your partner always go to the grocery store and you get fish food, Ben& Jerry's ice cream because it's your favorite. I love fish food personally. And one day your partner goes to the grocery store and they bring home half-baked ice cream because they were really craving it. And you're like, come on, man. Like, I thought we always got fish food. They're like, no, I want to try this other thing. You could react by saying, oh, that's a huge affront to our relationship. Like, this was important to us as a couple. Or you can meet them where they are and say, okay, I'm willing to try this other flavor. Very, very small, but that is actually where these differences start to show.
hmm And it makes me think like that partner for the last couple months maybe was never that fond of fish food, but because they were like, "Oh, I love this person, everything's great," and as the honeymoon symbiosis wears off, they're like, "Oh, this is I actually prefer half baked." So
Yeah.
it's like I can see how differentiation is an apt term for that because it's your chance to say like, "Wait, I am an individual. I have my own preferences," and kind of the fire of the fantasies died down a bit.
Yes,
I, I
exactly.
feel like there's also though there's the it was overwhelming and it made me act differently than what maybe my preferences are away from this person. But there's also just the very scary thing that no, we both did really like that a lot. And now I'm
Mhm.
changing, which I think is a kind of existential threat when especially if you're still in the symbiotic. Okay, they can just
Yes.
change.
The
If you don't,
old me liked fish
yeah, if
food.
you don't like
I'm a
fish food, you can not
half-baked
like
man
me.
now.
Right.
A new man.
Right, right. No, it's so silly, but it's also so true. And this is the kind of thing that we'll see people will bring in, but we always did this thing. And as you guys are saying, but maybe that person never actually liked fish food
Yeah.
and they were doing it for the other person.
But babe, that was our thing. You watched me play video games. This is what we did every Friday night.
Babe, you're so sexy. That was your thing.
Yeah, you loved watching me play COD. What's the deal?
What the hell?
No, now
This
you're
is
gonna go read
such a
your book in your
great
room. What's going on?
such
Okay,
a great representation of a heteronormative relationship. I love it.
okay. Wow. So we start to kind of reconstitute ourselves as individuals in this stage, and then
Yeah.
that's when the first very minor conflict is seated. Okay. And then is
Yes.
there anything
And then, of
else
course,
to differentiation?
yeah, well, of course, it will then take bigger steps, right? So maybe that person starts
That's
training for a
froyo.
marathon or
Oh,
they move to froyo.
doing a push-up challenge.
Some crazy stuff is happening with this person.
I don't maybe they just wanted some structure for their training plan, and marathon's just like a natural goal. So still pretty in line with who they see
The
themselves
Greeks
as.
did it. Man, the men yearn to run 26
Yeah,
miles.
also, I'm 5'10", by the way. I just, you said I was 5'9" earlier, and I just needed to dispel that really quick. Okay, so bigger
Action's
things start
important.
changing.
Big things
The
start
career
changing. Also,
changes.
you're a runner. You're a runner, right, Preston?
Yeah. Yeah, it's who
and you
I
are too,
am.
Margaret. Yeah.
Not as good as him.
But you run. And I think I knew you were running a marathon recently.
Yeah, I ran the LA
Yeah.
Marathon.
Oh, amazing. So if you were in relationship with someone, for example, and obviously you've done it, so you know what goes into marathon training. My husband is training for a marathon that he's running next weekend, actually. So I also know what goes into it. And they spend a lot of time away from the home when you're training, right? It's these like hours long practice runs. It's a lot of time and space alone. That might be really triggering for a couple that has not yet differentiated. And so I think that, again, these small seeming things to us actually represent something a lot larger, which is no, I'm going to start searching for what is important to me as an individual and implement that as part of my relationship. And you, as the person who is receiving it and observing it, have to learn to sit with it and kind of deal with the anxiety that comes up without taking it as a threat to the relationship. And that can be really hard, especially because it's pretty typical that one partner will start to differentiate before the other does. So the other person is kind of like just trying so desperately to pull that person back to symbiosis, right? It's scary. It's scary to feel like they're leaving the comfort of that.
And I think I've noticed I feel like I've been in stages where I try to start differentiating again, and I can feel them trying to pull back into symbiosis. And I think
Mm-hmm.
how they communicate that, or like the means at which like that tension is formed, can also like influence the turbulence of the relationship, I guess. So
Yeah.
like some people will try to pull someone back into symbiosis by almost like creating crisis or disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And then that creates like a really big low, which puts you back on a high. And then almost you end up both back in symbiosis on this like roller coaster, which I guess when I think about
Yeah.
the couples that have those like high highs and low lows, I feel like they're just like alternating between like euphoric symbiosis and then like dysphoric calamity
Mm-hmm.
without ever like, and the second one differentiates it, like it destabilizes the whole dynamic and they have to like recorrect back into the maelstrom. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Rachel and Ross and Friends when she got the job. She got this job at Ralph Lauren, and she'd been like a waitress in the first couple seasons. And then she has a male boss, and she's dating Ross, and Ross cannot handle it that she now has a priority and like is working with another person and flips out, and that's why they go on a break and blah 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 blah.
Mm.
But I'm like, this is that. This is there's other things too, but it's
mhm.
like the
This is
kind of,
that.
and it was also the who's allowed to differentiate. There were some gender norms that came in there too.
Okay.
That's
Well,
interesting.
so I can picture you, Nikki, now in the patient room or like in the therapist's office, and you're like, oh, one of these clients is in symbiosis, the other one's starting to differentiate, and that's how you're starting to organize them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Exactly.
Okay.
What are the
Mhm.
next? Because there's more stages, right?
Yes, we can get through the stages. So there's three more. So stage 3 would then be exploration. And so beyond differentiation, there then comes a point where you're kind of refinding yourself in the relationship. So it's taking it one step further. So this is kind of individuation. So you're moving from we back to I, right? We're in differentiation. We talked about those different kinds of examples. This is a fuller understanding of the self and who you are to your core as an individual, kind of separate from your partner. Because it's very easy to lose yourself in partnership, right? When two people are melding together, it's very easy for that to happen. And actually, as we talked about, almost encouraged in some ways at the beginning. And so in this stage, each partner's self-esteem is increasing apart from how things are in the relationship. So regardless of how things are between the two of you, if you're doing really well at work, that matters. And that is enough to kind of keep you happy and motivate you kind of internally, and you're driven and you're seeking out these new friendships or relationships or hobbies or whatever that may be. And this state of really knowing what gives you deep satisfaction that's not actually related to the relationship is key to this stage.
So
So
we're almost like a
differentiation
bunch
is
of
sort of
stem cells.
the start of it, and then this stage is more like maintaining that you're connected to them, but still almost returning to who you were before the relationship and that expanding, but with the relationship there.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And as you can imagine, this doesn't happen unless the relationship is stable enough for it to happen, right? Like you kind of have to go through those initial stages to reach this stage.
Yeah. Otherwise, you'll just keep getting sucked back in. Okay.
Right.
So,
Mm-hmm.
both, let's say we're in a stable relationship, both parties have individuated at stage 3. What
Mm-hmm.
happens then?
Okay, then we head to reconnection. So stage 4, reconnection. This is back and forth patterns of intimacy. So having moved through differentiation, then you've moved through exploration, you're now able as a couple to maintain your own point of view, your own sense of self without hostility. And you can then return to this deeper, more sustainable level of intimacy within the couple. So it takes those kind of initial stages to get to this place where you can, quote unquote, have it all. Although we're not quite there yet. There's one more stage. But you kind of learn like tangible things that you might look out for as a couples therapist that would indicate a couple's at this stage is you're no longer having difficult discussions that turn into hostile discussions. Or you may notice that there are things that couples just know how to do together. Like I know that on Tuesday and Thursday, I take the trash out. And on Saturday and Sunday, my partner does it. It's not even a discussion. We know how to function in this relationship together. We can kind of pull our weight, and we can also tolerate these other points of view that come up in relationship, especially when challenging things come up. So that's usually an indication that you've reached that level as a couple. And then, of course, you kind of oscillate between your individual needs and then the needs of the couple in this stage too.
Mm-hmm.
And so why is this not the last stage?
Yeah.
Like, what's the problem
you'll see
with
when
this
we get
stuff?
to the last stage.
Because I'm like, that sounds like,
Yeah,
let's
I'm
pack
like,
it
I'm
up.
gonna have
That
2
sounds
more
good.
stages after this. Like, oh, geez.
I feel like the last stage is almost like nirvana. Like, I don't know if I've ever seen a couple truly reach, maybe I have once or twice,
Just there to
but
keep you dreaming.
truly reach this stage.
Mhm.
Yes. And then the last stage is synergy. So this is joyful interdependence. So the we is now nourished by the two individuals, assuming we're in a, two-person partnership, and neither person needs to make great sacrifices to benefit the we. What's interesting about the last stage is that it can kind of mimic symbiosis in some ways, and that couples tend to be quite affectionate and loving with each other. But what's really crucial in terms of differences is that the two members of the couple have these clearly defined sense of selves and ways of managing their differences and their emotional reactions. So it's interesting. You almost go a little bit back to the beginning, but in, again, a much more sustainable way.
Yeah. It's like you can tolerate the closeness and not collapse back into each other, which I imagine would be harder than, yeah.
Right. And couples tend to create together, interestingly, during this stage. So give back to the world.
They make a podcast.
They make a podcast. Yeah.
It makes me think about like a chain. So it's like if I was one link of the chain, my partner's the other link, it's like you have to learn how to like meld, you like melt down the metal, and then you slowly become an individual again while you're interlinked. And then boom. You know what I mean? Like I'm an individual circle, you're an individual circle, but we're totally interconnected. Like
I love that.
A strong chain.
That is a good metaphor. Beautiful. Beautiful imagery.
Hey, it's Preston and Margaret. We went a little over with this episode, so if you're hearing this, it's because there's going to be a part 2, I promise. So I know we went over all the stages of what it's like to be in a couple from symbiosis to synergy, and you're probably excited to apply some of those, and we're going to get to do that, but it's not going to be until next week when Margaret and I are going to do some couples role-playing, and we're going to explore some of these dyads in real time.
We'll get to hear another accent from Preston.
Oh God, yeah, I'm applying a new accent, currently pending. We hope to do more of these episodes where we start out teaching some parts of the therapy and then applying it in real time. We still have to hone our timing. And sometimes they might just end up being 2 episodes because there's that much content to get through. So this is an experiment for us. We appreciate you being along for the ride. So like Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, we're going to have 2 parts now.
So come back next week for part 2. We just want to say, as always, thank you guys so much for listening to us and helping us build up a community of people who are interested in mental health at kind of all levels. One of the coolest things has been seeing your feedback, and really is people in healthcare, in psychiatry, but also people who are maybe pre-med or just want to know more. And so it's been really great to have you guys listen, engage, ask questions. Always leaving us reviews is helpful for our metrics of the podcast and to help us keep making it. You can come chat with us soon on Instagram. We'll have How to Be Patient podcast Instagram page. But for now, you can find us at our usual places, Presro across platforms, right?
At It's Presro on YouTube.
At It's Presro. I think you're the only thing that comes up. Whenever I had to search you to
Preston
link
Med
you,
Student.
it comes up. Did you mean Presto? Anyway, you can find me at Bad Art every day across Instagram, Substack, and TikTok. And you can also see our website for human content, which is howtobepatientpod.com. Anything to add to that? This is the first time I'm doing the outro.
No,
guys.
that'd be Margaret, you're doing great. Just keep it up. Just keep that momentum like you're on an on-ramp.
You can also find full episodes with visuals, whether you want that or not, on Preston's YouTube, which, sometimes you get to see the cats, which I enjoy. Thank you guys for... We say thanks for listening a lot.
Just be like, thank you so much for listening. Just throw it away. Don't even think about it.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Perfect.
We're your hosts, Margaret Duncan and
Preston Roche.
Our executive producers are Preston Roche, Margaret Duncan, Will Flannery, Kristen Flannery, Aaron Corney, Rob Goldman, and Shanti Brooke. Occasionally Lilac and Magnolia the cats as well. Our editor and engineer is Jason Portizo, and our music is by Omer Benzvi. To learn about our program disclaimer and ethics policy, submission, verification, and licensing terms, and our HIPAA release terms, you can go to our website, howtobepatientpod.com, or reach out to us at howtobepatient@human-content.com with any questions or concerns.
How to Be Patient is a human content production.
Thank you for watching. If you want to see more of us, or if you want to see, this is Lilac, she's my cat. She's going to be waving her hand at one of the floating boxes, which will lead to more episodes. Lilac, point to the other episodes. Lilac doesn't know what the internet is, but I swear they're there. They probably exist for real. But in the meantime, I'm just going to pet Lilac, and then I'm going to go dance in the background.